Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Alexey, and today I have a special guest, Richard Shaw. Richard is a wonderful guitar player. Also, he played with Cradle of Filth. Richard has some wonderful guitar courses on Riffhard and Lick Library. It's a huge honor to have you on my YouTube channel today, Richard. And let's start our interview. How you became a guitar player?
I became a guitar player from a very young age. I started playing guitar when I was 11, purely because I just got into bands like Queen and Metallica and the Beatles, and I just wanted to play guitar. So I was very lucky that I started quite young, and I was always playing in bands, and I just took guitar seriously. And then I was very, very lucky to turn it into a career. So it all worked out quite well.
So my next question is how you started playing metal music as a guitar player.
Metal music, again, that was a Metallica thing. I just naturally got into Metallica at a young age, and then that turned into finding other bands that were in the same genre as Metallica, and it kind of grew and grew and grew into heavier and faster music and more extreme music. And it just kind of grew from Metallica. Metallica was like the start of everything for me in terms of finding different styles of music, including heavy metal.
How you joined Cradle of Filth?
I was playing guitar for musical theatre when I was asked by a friend of mine who I've known for years and years and years, who was actually Cradle of Filth's front of house sound engineer. And apparently Cradle of Filth were really struggling to find a guitar player because Paul had left, but they didn't announce it. So they were trying to keep it kind of quiet that Paul had left, and they're trying to look for someone. They didn't want everybody knowing. So they started to ask for crew because they were starting to get really desperate. There was a tour coming up, and they asked for crew if they knew anybody. And that's when I got a call asking if it was okay to put my name forward for it. And then the next day I did my audition tape. I sent it off, like a YouTube video audition. And then about 3 or 4 days later, I got an email from Danny saying he was really impressed with my audition. Do I want to go on tour with them? I've got the job if I want it. And at that point, I didn't know I was staying in the band. I was going to do one tour, and then that was it, while they find whoever was going to replace Paul. But I think they liked me, and they said, do you want to stay? Seeing as you've done a good job and we like you, do you want to stay? And that's what I did. I stayed.
My next question is how to create a unique guitar tone for Cradle of Filth songs.
No, that's a really good question. Because you can get a really good guitar tone that you love, but it might not work with the other instruments. It might not work with Danny's voice. It might get in the way of the orchestra or the keyboards. You're taking up far too much bass frequency, so now you can't hear the bass. So me and Scott Atkins, the producer, we kind of sit there and just go, we've got a really, really good tone that we like to record to. And usually it was just the drums that I was playing to, because I was usually the first guitar player to come in. So the drums were finished, then I would come in and just play with a really good tone, get it dialed in exactly how I like it, and play to that. But then usually Scott would reamp later. So he would, once he's got everything recorded, he will reamp the guitars. Usually not too different from what we had, but you might use a different overdrive, or maybe just change the amp settings a little bit. So usually it's the same amp and the same kind of equipment, but you'll change the EQ slightly, or maybe change how he's mic'd the cabinet so it sounds a little bit better with all the other instruments.
So nowadays, can you record a guitar on a professional level at home studio, or should you go to a real studio?
Again, really good question, and I think the proof is out there, because I recorded the 2 new Cradle of Filth songs that are on the live album. I recorded my guitar parts in this room. So I actually didn't go to the studio. I'd already left the band. I wasn't in the band anymore, but then they messaged me asking if I was willing to play on the one song I wrote and one song I co-wrote. So they were like, do you want to play guitar on it? No need to come to the studio. You can record it from home. So I actually recorded all the guitars for those 2 new studio tracks from home. But there was even songs on Existence is Futile where we added guitar solos after I had already recorded all of my parts. So Scott was like, it's okay, record the solos from home. So I think it was like 2 or 3 guitar solos on that record. That most of the guitars were recorded in the studio, but there's like 3 guitar solos that I recorded in this room. So that, I think that goes to show that it can be recorded from home. And I just used plugins, and then again sent the DI files to Scott, who again reamped it and made sure it was all sounded really, really good. And I genuinely cannot remember which solos were the ones I did from home, because it was so long ago. So, but when I listen to the record now, I really struggle to tell which ones I did from home, because they all sound good, because Scott did such a great job with the mix.
What is your opinion on using virtual guitar amps and guitar impulse responses for metal guitars production?
I like them. I like the convenience of them. This is my laptop that I'm doing this on now, and I have lots of plugins and impulse responses and everything in my laptop. So when I'm recording, whether it was for Cradle of Filth or whether it's for any kind of guest solo or anything where I need to record guitars, I've got everything ready to go. As long as I have my interface, a cable, and my guitar, I can record anywhere. Because sometimes I can't get to a studio, or I don't have the time to move everything around. I can just come in this room and record everything, and it's ready to go. I don't have to have amps and be really, really loud. I recorded some of my Cradle of Filth tracks at like 11 o'clock at night using impulse responses and plugins. And then the beauty of that is you can just switch off the plugins. I use Logic. I just switch off the plugin. I've got the clean DI and send that to the producer to reamp. So for working on ideas, I like the fact that everything's compact and it sounds really good. The technology is now getting really, really good, where impulse responses and plugins sound amazing, like really good. I didn't like them years ago, but now that they sound so good, I have no problem using them at all. But if it came to using them on an actual album, maybe technologies do it now, but I've never used it on a final album. It's always been real amps that have been, like, as I reamped after I've recorded everything.
How often should you practice in playing the guitar a day to become a good guitarist?
That's a tough question, because it all comes down to, obviously, the more you practice, the better you'll be, I think. So, but you've got to be realistic, because life can get in the way. Like when I was a teenager, I'd practice for like 4 to 6 hours a day. And now, if I can get like 30 minutes, because I'm busy, I'm a dad, I've got commitments in life that I've got to squeeze guitar practice in. So my thing with practice now is, as long as you're practicing and it's quality practice, I don't want to just sit here and just noodle with no plan of what I need to practice, because that's okay, but I'm not going to really get better. So now when I practice, I sit and really, really focus. It's like, okay, I want to get better at this. I'm going to try this over and over and over again and make sure it's really good. No distractions, phone off or in a different room. So I think it's not necessarily about how much you practice, but the quality of the practice is what will get you really, really good.
So my next question is, what guitar tricks and licks should you learn to play black metal on a good level?
Ooh, right. Well, this is interesting. I think, in my experience with Cradle of Filth, especially, obviously there's a lot of tremolo picking. So tremolo picking was essential. Nearly all Cradle of Filth songs have tremolo picking, and it's a great technique. It does sound great for that style of music, especially when you're going with the blast beats. It's chaotic and fun, and it sounds incredible when done well. So I would recommend getting really, really good at tremolo picking. Just, I suppose, knowing your scales, your minor scales. Try tremolo picking with them, and again, just a lot of down picking as well. So it's more techniques with this hand: tremolo picking, down picking, gallops, like the Iron Maiden gallops. I found were really, really, really useful for cradle as well. So it's more right hand techniques. Not necessarily, you don't need to be ridiculously fast here, but I find you do need to have very good control here on the picking hand.
Can you please tell me about your Riffhard process, what people can learn from them?
Yeah, Riffhard was a lot of fun to film. I was very, very surprised and flattered that they asked me to be one of their tutors. And I basically go through some Cradle of Filth songs. I go through Necromantic Fantasies off the last album and play it through, show you how to play all the parts. There's performances on there. And then I go over some of the techniques that I found that was very useful for me on my personal guitar playing journey, where I talk about legato and hybrid picking and things like that. Because I love hybrid picking, using the pick and my fingers. Even for extreme metal, I find it's very, very useful. So I talk about those techniques, but also my approach to using these techniques and how we can use it in songwriting, and as well, not only getting better as guitar players, but getting better as songwriters.
Do you use MIDI guitars for layering with real guitars in production of your metal songs?
Oh, I've never done it personally. But I know some bands who have, and it can sound really, really good. The way I see it, you can do whatever you want as long as the end result sounds good. I've heard some MIDI guitars being used, and it just doesn't sound good at all. It sounds fake. It sounds like it's been edited to high heaven. It's not been played by a human, and I don't like that kind of sound. I think people can see straight through, well, hear straight through it. They know it's fake, and to me it really puts me off. I just don't like that sound. But in terms of, like you say, like having real guitars, but maybe there's a little bit of MIDI guitars just to thicken it up a little bit, if done well, it can sound really, really good. Like, I know, for instance, the composer Danny Elfman, I love Danny Elfman, and he'll have the orchestra, but he only records about half the orchestra, and the other half is MIDI. I don't know whether it's because of budget cuts in Hollywood or whatever, but sometimes half of his percussion is MIDI percussion. Half of his strings are MIDI strings, but it's blended very, very, very well with real instruments. So I think if it's done well, it's not a problem. It's when you can tell it's fake. I'm not a fan of that.
So my next question is, should you record yourself when you are playing to the tempo for a guitar practice?
I don't think you have to, but to me, I think it's good practice if you're trying to learn how to record yourself, like trying to play to a click with the red light on, saying recording. That's like an extra pressure that people put on themselves. So I don't have that pressure. I press record and I feel comfortable. But when I was much younger, I felt that pressure. It's like, here we go, and record. And my playing just wasn't very good because I felt the pressure. I didn't feel relaxed. So I think people should record when you feel like you're at that level where you want to record and you get used to it. Because, like I say, some people press record and everything leaves them. They feel the pressure. And the only way you can really get comfortable with recording is by recording. Sometimes I even do it just on my phone, where I'll record myself, like film me, like I've written an idea, and I'll film it so I can see what my hands are doing, but it's not very good because it's just for me. It's not like I show people, but sometimes having that extra pressure of recording yourself either visually or orally is very, very good, because that helps, almost like a performance. You get used to performing under pressure. So I think it can be very, very useful, but you don't have to do it, but I think it's very useful.
My next question is, can you please tell me about your Lick Library guitar courses?
Yeah, Lick Library, that was another thing that I was really surprised they asked me to be a part of. But Lick Library, for those who don't know, is basically a website, which is, I see it as almost like Netflix for guitar players, where there's so many courses like that, and the tutors, such as myself, show you all kinds of stuff. You can learn theory, you can learn your favorite songs, you can learn techniques, everything together. There's even like entire albums on there, like that. You can learn every single note to an entire album, which is amazing. Like, for instance, you want to learn like the whole of Cowboys from Hell by Pantera, you can do that. And Sam Bell, one of the tutors, can show you how to do that. So with my courses, I kind of just do what they ask me to do. They'll come up with an idea and they're like, can you teach these songs? So sometimes I'm just teaching individual songs in all kinds of styles. And then sometimes I'm teaching actual courses. So for instance, I've got a course on there where it's like, it's called 5-minute fixes, where each video is literally 5 minutes, where I go, this is how you get better pinch harmonics. Here's another 5-minute video. Here's how you can get better with the whammy bar. Here's how you get better with hammer-ons and pull-offs. And then there'll be certain courses where I teach people entire solos, like some of the best solos of the 90s, for example, and some of the best solos of the 2000s is going on their website soon. So much you can learn on there with loads of different tutors. So it's a great website. If you're a guitar fan and you just think, I wonder if I can learn this, most likely they'll have it on the website. It's like Netflix, just press play and learn how to play the song. It's really cool.
So my next question is, what is a good guitar for playing extreme metal music?
The best guitar for playing extreme metal music is the one you are most comfortable with. That's my honest answer, because people always questioned why I used PRS in Cradle of Filth, and my honest answer was because I'm really comfortable playing PRS. I could play other guitars, but it doesn't matter what genre I'm playing, I feel comfortable with my PRS. But if you have to use this guitar to do this, I could do that as well, as long as I just feel kind of comfortable on it. Like, for instance, I've got friends of mine who bring Ghost, and they have to use the Ghost, the Hagstrom Phantom guitar. And some of them love it, some of them don't like it, but they have to use it, and they get comfortable with it. They just have to put in the time to get comfortable with it. But I'm a big fan of, for extreme metal, like I like high output pickups. I'm not the biggest fan of active pickups, personally. But if I was playing only metal rhythm guitar, I would definitely go with active pickups. But there's something about active pickups I don't like about lead guitar. But that's just me personally. It's not saying that it doesn't work. But for me personally, I prefer high output, passive humbuckers for playing extreme music. And then as long as the rest of the guitar is set up well and feels and sounds good for me, I could technically use anything, but I just prefer to use PRS.
My next question is, how often should you change guitar strings?
Depends on how often you play and under what conditions. Like, now that I'm at home, I don't need to change my guitar strings as often as, say, when I'm in the studio or when I'm on tour. I use new tone strings, and when I was on tour with Cradle of Filth or King 810, we're under hot lights, hot stages, the adrenaline harder, so the strings are getting a beating, and they're traveling. You'll probably play a hot venue, then quite a cold venue the next day, and that affects the strings. So I would usually change my strings every 4 shows. Some people like to change their strings every show. I found with new tone strings, I was changing them every 4 or 5 shows, and then they wouldn't sound very good. Once I got to maybe the 5th show, they're starting to not have, they haven't got the life that they once had. So that's when I change them. To me, whether I'm at home, whether I'm on tour, or I'm in the studio, when they start to sound like they're losing their life, then I'll change the strings. And depends how, because I've got quite a few guitars. I'm very lucky to have quite a few guitars. So some guitars will have the strings on for months because they don't get used much. But then guitars like this one I've been teaching with this morning, I'll probably need to change the strings soon because they've been on a week, but I've been playing it for hours and hours a day every single day. So I'll probably change the strings soon on that one. But what I'm trying to say is I just change the strings whenever it sounds like it needs it. If the intonation starts to go, or they just don't sound like they have life anymore, it's like that's time to change the strings.
Thank you so much, Richard, for such a wonderful interview. It was a huge pleasure talking to you. And it was a huge honor having you on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexei. I really enjoyed those questions. It was a good interview. Thank you, Alexei.